really near and dear to my heart, not only as an external consultant, but also as a business leader. And I have had the opportunity to work with some really great teams, including Aisling and her team over the last several years on some research in the area of employee experience. And over the last couple of months, all of us have been experiencing a very unique and universal moment. The first time in certainly my life, and many of our lives, I think, where every one of us is living in the same context. And it gives us a really amazing opportunity to take advantage of the disruption that is being caused, but also to understand at a deeper level what's really important, to employees and to people. And that's why I think that this series that Aisling and her team have started is so incredibly important, because in all of the conversations that I have had over the last 2 months, the inevitable learning that we all walk away from is the criticality of the function of HR, our focus on people, and how we show up is becoming right at the forefront. And many of our CPOs, our chief people officers, and our CHROs around the world are the ones who are leading the effort to move us not through just the crisis, but into a realm of recovery and then rebound that we are all anxious to really move into. So, Andrew, if you don't mind, very quickly, I'll look at the next slide and just tee up the focus of our discussion today is not on where we probably are right now, but how we're going to use our understanding of the factors of employee experience to really accelerate into recovery. And some of you may feel like you're already moving in that direction. I'd love to have a conversation about that. But many of us are just starting to find our way into planning for those recovery phases that we really want to move into. So throughout this discussion, let's make sure that post your questions and let's take them as you go. And I know that these are very short, bite-sized discussions that Aisling and the team have created. So I've put my contact information there. So if you want to reach out afterwards to continue the discussion, please do so. Okay, I'm ready for the next slide. So as I was just saying, our new context has really put a spotlight on the importance of HR, and our actions, I think, are really important as employers right now in defining who we are, how we show up, and the fact that we are always under this strange sort of always on spotlight. Employees are making decisions right now by what we do as employers to determine whether they are motivated or inspired by what we are providing in our platform for them to be successful. And, leaders have truly during the last couple of months, really demonstrated a sincere interest in the factors that make up the employee experience, particularly in the areas of well-being. And you think about this from all 4 elements of employee well-being, whether it's physical, emotional, social, or financial well-being. Employers are really talking about all of that. It's interesting, though, the last quote, the last statistic that you see here on the right-hand side of the page, the 34% represents the number of employers who are actually formally pulsing around this or asking their employees what it is they need or want during this time. And I find that really interesting because I was just on a conference last week where we had a couple of people from IBM who said the opposite of that. They said, we have a constant always on pulse where we are asking our employees what it is they need from us. What are the resources that are missing? What are the, what are the tools that they need to help them be as productive and effective and engaged as they possibly can? So I think there's some really important lessons learned, to address what I see as a potential gap. The statistics that you see here, as Aisling has just said, are ones that we started collecting in a global survey last February. So just a few months ago, we started the survey in China when the COVID crisis hit, and we've continued to do that. And the data that you see here is representative of what we collected at the end of April. So this is what employers are doing. If we take a look at the next page, we'll see that this is what the employees are doing, and what we see as the impact on the employee experience. And what we see here is that there is an increase in a lot of things that are important to employees and that employee experience that we were talking about. So there's an increase in collaboration. Not a surprise. I think people are forced into a position where I think many of us find ourselves constantly jumping from call to call or video conference to video conference. We see a heightened sense of that cooperation, a heightened sense of a need for employees to have leaders that they can call on, that they can trust to help inspire them and give them the direction that they need in order to guide their day to day. And that's what leads us into what we see as the most important things for us to focus on, which, if you go to the next slide for me, Andrew, this is the challenge that I would put to this group, or maybe it's a question, but I would challenge myself around this on a daily basis these days. And the question I'm asking myself is, when we look back at this moment a few years from now, or maybe a decade from now, what do we want to remember and be remembered for? As leaders, what would we put in that time capsule? Mala Singh from Electronic Arts was in a session that I was hosting last week, and she said, we have the gift of opportunity in this very difficult situation. And this is representing a defining leadership moment for us. And we have a forthcoming study that we have just completed surveying 9 million employees worldwide for. And the question that I'm interested in from this survey is the leadership actions that allow organizations to thrive during change and turbulence. And I think we're all very confident that that's where we are right now. No matter what factor you look at, whether that it's economic, it's social, it's governmental, it is, all of those things are in a time of disruption and turbulence. And what we have found so far in our survey, in the very first cut of that, there are really 4 things that leaders need to be doing. And one is not a surprise to this group, is care for others. So integrity, respect, and humanity, or adding that human element to the way that we are interacting with the people around us, whether they're colleagues or employees or our neighbors, is a really important aspect of leading through this time of change and turbulence. The second one is setting a clear sense of direction to inspire and motivate people around a path. Now, that's harder than the words make it sound, because in today's environment, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of ambiguity, there are a lot of questions that another CHRO I was talking with last week said, they want to know, when is this going to end? When can we return to the office? When can my kids go back to school? How do I learn to be a better teacher during the times when I do have to become a part-time professional, parent, and teacher? And the answer to most of those questions are, we don't know. I don't know yet. But there are things from a professional perspective and as leaders in an organization where you can create short-term objectives to help people move down a path. It doesn't have to be the path, but a path. And that's what employees are looking for. The third is, again, not going to be a surprise to this group. It's about soliciting and responding to feedback. So making sure that there's that continuous loop. And if you think about the statistic that I just showed you a couple of pages ago, about only 34% of organizations are actively asking the question of employees, what do you need? What else can I get you? How do I help you be more successful in your current context? So looking for that, soliciting and responding to feedback is really important. And the fourth one is being agile by moving swiftly from ideation to implementation. And we have seen so many examples of that in the last couple of months here in Europe, particularly where we've gone into lockdown, accentuated shutdown, phases of sheltering in place, whatever terminology your local government is using. And I think about couple of examples that I got in the last couple of weeks where there was an organization that had planned on going fully digital to a very paperless system. And they had a 12 to 14 month project plan in place to do that. And they did it in 3 days. So whatever was going on in terms of the planning process, the obstacles that were getting in their way, they were able to move very swiftly and very agilely from this ideation to implementation phase. And that is one of many conversations I'm having with organizations about that. Another is a design company we were working with that had told their employees that they were never going to provide flexible work from home opportunities because that just wasn't part of their overall philosophy and culture. And now they've gone to 100% of their employees globally working offsite, working from home, and they're finding very surprisingly that has been very effective for the majority of their employees. So I think we are really breaking down some barriers. We are removing some sacred cows from our ways of working that are defining how we as leaders can operate in a time of turbulence and disruption. So let's go to the next page, because I think this is where we start to think about what are the other areas that we can influence with respect to the employee experience that will help us accelerate into recovery. And the chart that you see here is based on some research that we have been doing for several years. It's feedback from millions of employees globally. And the first thing I would say is that this is called our High Performance Employee Experience Index. And this has been something that we released at the end of 2019. And people like the likes of Josh Bersin have picked this up and said, this is an amazing way for us to think about how to identify and then begin to address the specific factors of the employee experience. And the way to think about this is, we'd love to be good at all of these things, but really there are 4 core pillars of employee experience that you see along the very bottom of this slide that I think are the first anchor point to consider. So one is purpose, not a surprise to this group, I would imagine. Work, reward, and people. So you see that in the gray boxes along the bottom of the slide. And then as you move up, if you look along the left-hand side of the slide, you see these words: essentials, emphasis, and excellence. The essentials are the aspects of the workplace that provide little differentiation for performance across companies, but are really important to get right. So I need to understand, I need to be able to have an organizational operating model that helps me get work done, doesn't get in my way. So those are the kinds of things to think about there. The middle row is where high performance companies place additional emphasis, and they begin to break away from the global average of employee engagement. And these topics are really important right now, and where we see a lot of differentiating activity around personal agency, the inclusiveness, making sure people are feeling included, are part of the community, which is incredibly important right now as people are working in isolated home offices, can use their voice to speak up and can drive new ideas and abilities to advance their skills. And then the last area that you see here on the very top, this is where high performance companies create a differentiated experience through what we call the hallmarks of excellence. So first, they inspire connection to mission and purpose. They create a sense of drive through strong customer focus and market agility, and they provide growth opportunity to fill employees' ambition. And they engender deep trust in senior leadership effectiveness. So there are some slides that follow behind this that go into how we, how each of these come to life. But I think there are a couple of important things to note about this. I think the first is that although this isn't like Maslow's hierarchy, you get the bottom things right and then you move up. As I said, you should get those bottom ones, those areas of the essentials, in place, because it's difficult to inspire and drive inspiration if people don't feel like they're paid fairly, or they have, a lot of bureaucracy that gets in the way of them being able to help support and drive the growth inside of an organization. So think about, and drive and motivate an interest in working toward those things that you see in the areas of excellence. But know that not only about 30 organizations out of the 500 that we look at on an annual basis are able to say they are high performing employee experience organizations. It's a really difficult bar, to overcome. But when you think about assessing your own organization around these, think about them in these three areas of the essentials, areas of emphasis and focus, and the hallmarks of excellence. And think about it in that way as you start to determine what should come next for yourselves. And the way that we have done this with organizations over the last 5 to 6 months is to essentially get a group of people together, a group of leaders together, and assess themselves against each of these areas. You can certainly use your employee engagement survey results to do that, but do like a current state and desired future state exercise where you think about what's going to get you the most value, and where you have the biggest gaps. So that's a very quick highlight of what we want to think about when we are talking about the factors that make up our employee experience. I'd love to open it up for some questions. There's lots more I can say, but I'd love to see what the group thinks, and answer some questions, or take some thoughts.
Angel, that was super. I got so much out of that data and the insights that go with it. And it struck me that an awful lot of things in your boxes are really a new bar for employee experience. And I don't know if it's fair to say, but I think we masqueraded good employee experience with luxury offices and cool innovation workshop rooms and perks that really are office-based perks, rather than maybe the more deep leadership capability requirements that we have today. Do you think that this is really a gateway for a whole new version of employee experience to emerge and will send HR in a new direction about where they focus their time and energy.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm really excited about, this particular disruption. That's the silver lining to this, the situation that we find ourselves in. I've had a number of conversations with very large global employers who have said, particularly around the area of inclusion and employee voice, they have found that they have become more inclusive. They have reduced the amount of bureaucracy. They have been able to connect differently with employees because everyone almost starts out with a different level of footing. It's almost equal footing because there's no, the technology is the same, right? And particularly if your voice, like there's limited, you're not looking at gender, you're not looking at color, you're not looking at ethnicity, you're not looking at where that person is, right, in the world, because they haven't, they haven't flown in from somewhere else. And it just sets a different, sort of a different context for these discussions to take place. And for whatever, I mean, we need to take advantage of that. So I absolutely believe that. And because the technology is also, that's our very strange sort of always on filter that I talked about. Like we get on these calls and, for those people who may have been reluctant or didn't have as strong or assertive of a personality in a group meeting, all of a sudden the technology has reduced that barrier for them to be able to feel like they have a voice. Right? So it doesn't completely, get rid of, those very strong personalities. But at the same time, what I'm hearing from heads of HR and very senior leaders around the world is that this is creating a much more inclusive, much more of an opportunity for personal voice and personal agency to, to take precedent. And when you think about those areas of emphasis, that is absolutely where those are, where those are coming from. So I do think that it creates this opportunity.
Yeah, I'm hearing similar things. I was talking to a number of HR directors this week, and they were saying, we want to capture the stuff that's really working well right now, and we want to figure out how do we sustain it when we get back to the new normal. So it's almost like we've got something right here without planning for it or managing it in any particular way. It's just kind of evolved itself. We've cut through endless bureaucracy and we've just created agility overnight, and now we want to figure out how do we hang on to it. So I think it's definitely a new era. But I'm conscious other people may have questions, so I want to clear the floor for
I think one of the things that might prompt some questions is whether or not people are experiencing this for themselves, this opportunity and this particular experience that's being described by Angel. So just out of the people here today, I mean, is there anyone here who'd like to volunteer their own experience in that regard? I'm going to wait for one of you. We'll see if anyone volunteers. Otherwise, we might have to volunteer you. Oh, we've got a lot of shy people today.
Well, that's okay. I did see the question about the slides, and for sure, we'll make sure that you have these.
Yeah.
You for sure can have these slides and the others that went along with it. I think one other point that I would make is there was a question yesterday on a panel that I was on, and they said there are a number of things in the High Performing Employee Experience Index that we've known for a long time, right? We've known the importance of inspiring authentic leaders. We've known that effective managers help to ensure that employees feel connected, part of a community, have a voice, and are giving opportunities to build capability. And they said, what do you think is the difference now? Because these are conversations that we've been having for a long time, but what's the difference? And my response to that was really, now we have data that actually supports this in a really specific way, right? So when Aisling and I were having this conversation with our, internal clients 10 or even 15 years ago, it was more the research was telling us, but we didn't have, so we had data and surveys that said, you should do this. But now in today's environment, not only do we have that, but we have the quantitative connection to business and financial performance that is telling us that these specific things on the index are creating, influencing, and accelerating performance. The differences, right? There's data that backs up the HR story that we have in a very robust way that we may not have had 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I wonder as well if leadership, because I think that when you talk about inspiring leaders, it's really feels like a high bar for a lot of people. It really almost feels off-putting because they feel like, now I need to be Obama style charisma. But I wonder
Right.
I wonder if inspiring leadership means something very different now. Whether people the inspiring leader is the one who checks in on how are you doing, how are you coping, that authenticity, the one who's not afraid to show some vulnerability, the one who's not afraid to go, guys, give me some feedback, so I wonder if even that concept has moved on a degree now, that we can start breaking it down and going, actually, it's not, you don't need to be the big charismatic leader, but you just need to follow these kind of, check in with your people, give them voice, care about well-being, these other things that maybe are more manageable for every leader to take up.
Right. And Aisling, I think that's a really important point, because I think there's one Obama, right? Or I guess two, both of them are quite inspiring. But what I would say is that's why this other study that I briefly referenced, which we don't have all of the data out yet, is so important, because I think it does break it down to something that is reachable, that is approachable for, the average leader, not the noteworthy historical leader. And like I said, it's about caring for others. I think most leaders do. Are you operating with integrity? Are you saying one thing to an individual and the same thing to the group? You just said the other thing, which is about soliciting and responding to feedback. And the other thing is about, setting direction, or a sense of direction for employees. This idea of clear expectations in today's environment, even when it's really short term, right? It could be this week's objectives, is really helpful for most employees, right? Because they are dealing with such uncertainty and ambiguity in everything else, that even that little bit of directional, nudging is enough. And, we consider that, those simple actions to be part of, what you see in the hallmarks of excellence, just like you just said. And don't shoot for the moon, like, just get to the sidewalk outside your house, right? Like sometimes that's enough for employees during this very disruptive time.
Angel, thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful place to leave it. I think the Obamas themselves will be very, very happy with the message of hope you've brought today to our crowd and our community here with Tandem and HR at the Heart. We're really, really grateful to you for joining us today. I'm very conscious, as always, of the people's time, everyone taking their time out of their day today. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Next week, we'll be joined by Alison Hodgson, who's the HR Director of Virgin Media. And we'll be following up with everyone with the slides and an email with the recording as well of this session. So thank you so much, Angel, again. Thanks, Aisling, as well, our CEO at Tandem. Thanks to everyone for joining us again for these sessions. They're such a great way to connect in every week, every Tuesday. So we'll see you again next Tuesday, and again, see you again, Angel. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.